Hi everybody, we're going to turn your normal basic fingerpicking blues into a style where you can play leads and more fancy accompaniments. Hi everybody, it's Martin from the Washboard Resonators. On this lesson we're going to turn your basic fingerpicking blues into something more advanced. To do that I'm going to show you some simple scale ideas, some ways of keeping the bass going, how to take solos, how to use chord tones, and a range of ideas which will have you all up and down the neck come up with ideas that makes your blues playing much more interesting. Okay then, I've got my trusty 1930 Tricone. You can do this in any acoustic or any electric. We're going to mostly play out the key of E. I will show you how to use these ideas in a different key later in the lesson. So I'm going to flash up a 12-bar blues in E, just so you can all see that. All these ideas, when we talk about A7 chords, B7 chords, you'll be able to adapt them if you're playing a normal blues. I am actually going to use the gospel song, the Sister Rosetta Tharpe song, Up Above My Head, because it uses the same chords but in a different sort of form. But it's a much quicker form to get through, so we'll be able to show you the ideas quicker. Okay, I've moved the camera closer so we can see the fretboard. So I'll show you a quick example of the song Basic that I'll be using to show all the concepts across the different chords. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Yes, I really do believe there's a joy somewhere. Okay then, so that's how it's meant to sound. Now, I'm going to use a thumb pick. You can just finger pick. You can strum. When we get to doing the lead lines, you can do what you want. You can use a plectrum. You know, I've got this to sort of do some hybrid stuff. So I can use it like a plectrum, or I can use it as a thumb pick. Use it like that way. So the first concept we're going to look at is using a minor pentatonic scale and how you can use that in the context of putting in interesting lines. So the minor pentatonic scale is similar to a blues scale. If you don't know it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you now what they call the first position. So now you should be able to see a map of all the pentatonic positions. What you'll be able to do is come back to this, see what minute you're on, and just come back and pause it when you need the other positions that I'm going to explain to you in a second. So coming back, let's just take position 1 and how we might use that. So, first thing to think about is, because it's an E minor pentatonic scale, we're kind of doing some bluesy runs. What makes things sound bluesy, even though the guitar chords might have a major third in, we play solo lines which kind of do this sort of minor third that's bent up a little bit, sort of between a major and a minor. So there's a major third note in the scale, there's a minor, we're doing in between. That's a very, very big part of the bluesy sound. So what you can think, the first thing about doing is how can you adapt while you're chunking along and your guitar playing, and then think about just using all those notes in the notes. Okay, see? So you see what I'm doing there is just using all those notes in that pattern against that chord. Okay, now there's different ways you can do it. You could play chords and then keep the bass going. I do have a video about ragtime guitar, which ragtime guitar really relies on a lot of thumb stuff. You'll be able to find it. But you could also, be playing. You could put those lines in, the single lines and fills. It's up to you. I'm just going to show you the concepts. So that's a really good thing. Now when we go to the B chord, So there's the B7. I'm just using at the moment all those notes. Now that's the note in the scale. Now this is one of the... Okay. So there's your A7 chord. That's another way of fingering A7. You can finger it like that. You can finger it like that. Well, look at that note. That's the same note at the scale. Okay, so straight away there from that one minor pentatonic scale. Straight away there, we put some little bits in that are interesting. So if you're quite new to playing blues guitar, you will need your pentatonic scales if you don't know them already, because it helps you map out the fingerboard and put things in all over the place. So to learn here's a little bit about just how to practice. If you don't know about this, split your time into thirds. You want to do a third on technique, you want to do a third on kind of making music, you want to do a third on repertoire. So if you're going to practice for an hour, you do 20 minutes on each, you set an alarm. So in terms of like just working on technique, if you could just play the scale straight, but you put a metronome on, you're now building timing as well as just getting your hand to physically pick correctly and just to learn the notes. What I'd also say is if you want to sing, while you're practicing playing your scales, practice singing. Just sing along. Now if it means that to do both together, you've got to have a drum machine going click, click, and you're do it right, do it slow, and that's the best way to do it. It'll be frustrating in the first spot, but you'll just build so much better technique as time goes on. The next thing is if you are learning scales. This is something which I didn't want to learn scales when I started having lessons when I was a kid, because we were just meant to go around these exercises and I just didn't connect with it. It took me till I was probably about 30 when I saw a YouTube video and the guy was saying, learn the notes, but then what you do is to reinforce it, try and use the notes in something like in the order that they're laid out, but make melodies, make music, be creative. And I just found that really helped me solidify the scales. So now I'm practicing my scales. So this is part 2 about making music. You couldn't do these little mini melodies without knowing where the scale is. So I'd say when you are practicing the things, maybe try and get it right 5 times. Press it right 5 times to the metronome without getting anything wrong, and then you move on to, kind of trying to make melodies. So that's me. That's scale learning now, but it kind of feels a bit more fun and interesting, and it goes in quicker and deeper. And then the third thing about like working your repertoire, you could, whether it's above my head or you wanted to play a blues song in E, spend that 20 minutes working on the song, learn the parts of the song, but then try and adapt things that you learn in the lesson. So if you've just learned this first position, E minor pentatonic, and you're playing, I don't know, oh, baby, don't you want to go? Oh, so you're working a song you want to play, baby, don't you want to go? Just try and use the thing out of your lesson in the song you're working on, or pick a song that allows you to use the things in your lesson. So you're actually, again, getting the muscle memory and the joy of playing. Let's just look at our second position, minor pentatonic. Can help us. Now, what you might have seen there is that position. Some people call this like a little blues house, because if you think about it, you've got the roof, and you've got the walls, so it's like a little square with like a little triangle on the top. And and obviously you've got other notes. So now, when you hear this in blues, it's a very familiar sound. Well, we can now see where it comes from. It comes from a minor pentatonic. So these are good notes. So that's the first position. So we're now into second position. Okay, so use all those positions, work on them a little bit every day, and I think after a month they'll be under your fingers, you'll know them all. And what you probably find is 6 months after you've done this video, and if you've worked on stuff, you'd be playing some blues song, you'd be on stage, or you'd be at home, you'd be at a party, and everybody would surround you. And wow, this person, they're deep. And you'll just find yourself, you'll do something that you didn't even think about, because it's all in there, it's all now muscle memory. And it's just waiting to be like let out. It's like a radio. You know, you think about, you tune a radio, you tune through the stations, and those stations are always playing, but you just have to tune into them. And learning guitar is a little bit like that. You learn all the bits that you need to learn, and then it's under your fingers just to come out when you want it. Now is a good time to say, if you find this video useful, do help me and Jack in return. You can go to the description below, you can join our mailing list. That is the best way to help us. You can buy us a coffee, find our socials, or alternatively, just like and subscribe the video, and that would be a really big help. Thank you. The first place really for a lot of these ideas that we're talking about is, which you'll hear in a lot of traditional blues music, is to use these lines as fillers for the vocal. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Oh, it's early in the morning. Really do believe, yes, I really do believe there's a joy somewhere. Okay, so we've all heard that a million times before. The vocal sings and then the guitar interjects. But that's one of the first major things you need to think about now, is be conscious of doing that. You don't, and it's about taste. You don't do it all the time, and it's about how you do it. Sometimes you can sing down up above my head. You know, you can do it up above my head. High music in the air. You can play softly, and I think that's a really important thing, is dynamics. Here's something which isn't even on my notes. If you're an intermediate musician, become conscious of dynamics. It will make your playing sound so much better. A lot of amateurs, they hammer songs, and everything's on like one level. And what a professional will do is up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head. So you see how there's dynamics there, there's light and shade, and there's quiet, and there's loud bits, and there's, you know, passion, and there's energy, and there's interjections. And what you're trying to do really, ultimately, as musicians, you're trying to tell a story, aren't you? You're trying to tell a story to people that are listening. So how do you keep people listening? If people just blather on like I'm doing, blah, 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 it's boring. But if somebody can be like, hey, I've got a bit of information for you. It's on my guitar here. You're going to listen in and go, what? You don't know what's coming. So think about that, you know, think about the vocal quality, think about communication when you're looking at this stuff. Okay, so let's now look at some concepts for actually playing instrumental passages, using some of these concepts. So, I think one of the first most important things you've got to think about when composing solos and using these concepts that we're talking about, where we're just using minor pentatonic scales now, it's question and answering. If you just play, a bit like I was saying before about blathering on, if you just play, hear music everywhere. Here we go. So what I'm doing, I'm just playing notes, and it just doesn't really say anything. The way to make it sound like you're saying something is you do question and answering. And that might sound something like this. It's question, answer, question, answer, answer. So think about that. I'm going to ask you a question. What is the answer? I want to say it a bit more times. What can I say back? So think about that when you're working on this stuff. Another thing to think about when you're using these ideas is think about resolution or not resolving. So you want to try and build tension and release tension. So your question could have tension in it. So often a good solos in the more blues idiom will end back on the one, the first note in the scale, which is, in this case, obviously we're playing an E, so it's an E. So it might be something like this. So you see, that's an E note. See here, that sounds resolved, and it's a question. That's an answer, and it resolves. Well, you can also not resolve the little melody lines. So I'm staying on the third note there. Finish on the E. So what I'm going between there is just resolving on the E, or not resolving, I guess. Again, think about that. Think about that as a way to spice up your playing. Okay, so we've looked at ways to solo, keep the music going. We've looked at ways to stab and make space and fill in. So that's two ways you can play solos and try and make them interesting. A third way is, a way I try to think about it, you're trying to think about dynamics and arrangement when you're putting a song together. I should probably do a video about arrangements at some point because it could be quite interesting. But I listen to a lot of different kinds of music, and I just listen purely sometimes for the arrangements and the songwriting ideas, the texture changes. And you can even think about texture changes, believe it or not, with just a solo acoustic guitar. Now, I showed earlier how dynamics can help, but another thing you can think about is sometimes bands will be playing and then a horn section will start doing something fluttery, and the drum and the bass will do a stabbing thing or something, and it changes texture, and then the next verse, the song just all goes along. So try and think of ideas like that for your solo. Try and think about how you might be playing. Here we go. So you can play it. So that was a walking bass line. Now, I don't know how much time I want to spend teaching walking bass lines here, but because I'm just at the moment meant to be on the minor pentatonic. But what I did there is just, you have to slow this down and watch. That's the E, play the B7s, and then the A is just the same thing, but one string closer to the floor. Okay, so it's another idea for these solos is think about arrangement, think about textures, but also think about other instruments. Imagine that you're playing, that you take a solo. Let's say you want to take 2 solos or 3 solos between singing. We'll play one as a normal finger picking band, play one, pretend you're a bass player, play the second one, pretend you're a piano player. Might sound weird, but the audience won't know what you're doing, but what they'll get is that each solo has its own identity and its own interest, and that will keep people listening, and hopefully you can tell a story. So let's just think about how you might, I showed you like a walking bass line. It's almost like a piano line, doom, ga-doom, 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 or a double bass. But you think about, so So I'm going to just do a little, as if I'm coming out of a normal solo. I just played what was basically a bass solo, and I was trying to stop myself, but I basically used nothing but that minor pentatonic scale. That's a slightly different, you know, scale. So that's just an idea. What would a piano do? They usually have notes that they'll usually, as they're playing, they'll be playing the chord, but they'll be playing different versions of the chord where the notes are in different orders, and they'll usually play through the chord. So think about that sometimes, where like, this because we're just using the minor pentatonic scale at the moment, it's a bit oversimplified, but imagine like, so you've got like imagine a pianist like playing with the fingers. Okay, so these are all. You think like a piano generally. So these are all things you can try and embody to sort of find ways to use these notes, but use them in interesting ways so you don't just play the same patterns all the time. Right, next up we're going to look at chord terms and how they just make our playing sound a little bit more interesting. You might have heard of people talk about sometimes playing the changes or playing through the changes. Well, we're going to very basically look at that at the moment. That's a whole other subject. There's loads of videos on that. That's months of work, you know, especially if you want to play electric blues. But for this, for this time, let's have a look. When you're playing your E chord in this song, which is in the key of E, your E minor pentatonic, all the notes work. When you play B7, that note isn't in the scale. And just to make it even worse, the note that isn't in the E minor pentatonic scale, if I play the B7, there's my B7, I'm putting my little finger on top, by the way, there, we're playing this, that's like a little, in fact no, I'll leave that out for now, because it's just going to confuse things. That note isn't in the scale, so if I play the chord, but with the note that's in the E minor pentatonic scale instead, it sounds good if you're doing a Radiohead B-side, but it doesn't sound good for blues. It makes that sound. So really that third note, that note there, if you can spell that as part of your solo, you spell that note when the song's playing the B7, it's going to sound like all your music completely fits with the song as it's going along. Now, the first thing to think about when you are doing that minor pentatonic thing, what you actually learn when you experiment with these kind of things that I'm talking about, what you kind of learn is which notes, especially when you work on like things not resolving, you soon find out that every time the chord changes, you leave certain notes out. If you just leave some of the notes out, it doesn't sound bad, you see. But now we're going to try and put the right notes in. So let's take the one chord, the E chord. We all know D7, right? D sharp, E7. So straight away now, let's just look at how we can use chord shapes to also produce solos. So straight away, chord shape. Now what you might recognise is that those two notes are the same as E minor pentatonic second position. Then we put this note on, because we're playing E7. So now we're playing the E7 chord. So you could even, you hear a lot of blues players use that as their opening riff. Oops, try again. Question, answer. Okay, so I mean, obviously you can learn different inversions. It's really early in the morning I'm doing this. I'm trying to be quiet to not annoy people. But the man with the resonator guitar. So yeah, like you can use those chord shapes up and down the neck. But what I'm showing you here is how you can just use them as chords first of all, then we'll look at breaking them down into solos. Then we're going to do a B7. Now, I'm sure you all know an A chord, yeah? Bog standard A chord, right? I'm sure you all know that if you just bar it and put your finger on the top string 4 frets up, you have an A note, well, an A chord. If you then take this down, that makes an A7, and we'll come back to that in a second. But imagine this, A sharp, B7. We've got a B7 there, we've got a B7 there. You can use those notes. Are you music in the air? I really do believe there's joy somewhere. Here we go. E7. Oh baby, we've now got a E7. I'm using that second inversion E7. A7. So what you probably all saw there is how chord shapes, inversions can be used to get you up and open up the fretboard away from this first box. Now, conversely, you can also break down those chord shapes and make melodies out. And just like we learnt those pentatonic shapes, we can now do a similar thing. So we already know that. We've already been using that blues house. Well, we've got E7. So you're just trying to make some melodies. You want to sound jazzy? Use your minor pentatonic. Use the minor pentatonic. Then use your chord tone. They're all actually right. We'll look at mixing the chord tones and the minor pentatonics later, but you know the minor pentatonics there. 7. We never got inversion. You know, and I'm not really a jazz guitar player, but what we do know in jazz is there's a lot of interesting voice leading and chromatically getting between places. So if we know that these two notes make like their own version of E7, and we can do that E7 there. Oops. You can basically, you just move those two fingers and you're playing an E7 to an E7. So that's like a piano thing I was talking about earlier, where you do what I call like inner voicing, so that you're still technically playing the same chord, or you're joining the chords. In this case, we're joining an E7 to an E7 with a chromatic move. Okay, so that's a way you can start to try to use single notes. So what you'll have heard there is that sounds a little bit more interesting, because even when I got to the B chord, I accentuate the B chord, I'd stab the B chord, give people an idea that the B chord's there, and then I'd just see that shape, which is a B major to a B7. Okay, so experiment with this. Make a backing track, use a blues backing track, and just have it going really slowly, dum da dum ba bum bum, and just practice hearing the E chord and breaking it down. Take it as slow as it needs to be. And it goes to the B chord. Da, dum. Right, you want to hear it. Resolve on the E because it goes back to the E chord. Above my head. And it does like a 7th thing to build tension to go to the A. Okay, now we've got an A. That's an A. E. Some kind of resolved in line. So that's how you break down these concepts, and it's down to you to spend more time applying them and using different parts of the neck. I mean, let's just think about this for a second. If that shape works for A7 and for B and B7, it also works for the 1 chord as well. One of my favourite ones to use when I do like Sweet Home Chicago is, you all know we play an E there. Well, imagine if you go past the 12th fret. Basically, if I replicate this chord here, I just use those 2 notes. 12th fret, 13th fret. Sounds good. Well, that's the 3rd position minor pentatonic. I like those 2 notes over the 4 chord. So look, this is how you can again use chord terms. It's just literally the chord. Chord terms. B7. Oh yeah, we're up the neck. So if got D7, got C7, got B7. So B7. So if you think about your normal D7 shape, we made an E7. Well, B7 is basically at fret 11. Let it breathe for that phrasing. B7. Try and turn substitution, don't worry about that. That's not for this lesson, I shouldn't have done that, sorry. That was a habit, dirty habit. So there's some ideas there for chord tones and how to use them. Next up, let's look at different keys. So everything we've done has been in the key of E because it's a good place to start from and a lot of blues works there. Let's just pick, say, B flat, which is what a lot of swing music and, you know, brass and horn keys are. Now, once you lose those open strings and that ability, things change a little bit. You have to either chunk the chords more, or you have to break up between chordal playing and runs. So, that wasn't even B flat then. So I'm B flat here. So you all know a bar chord, I'm sure. Awful, pathetic, beginner's bar chords. Well, look. There's a B flat chord, which I've just simplified. Now, if you've got a band playing with you, you don't need to put the bass in. In fact, you want to leave it out. If you're a bass player or a keyboard player, voicing chords in the middle of the neck, when the overall band's playing, or there's a drummer or whatever, even a bloody washboard player, you want to voice chords quite small. It makes the band sound better. When you play by yourself, you'll want to put the low end in to fill it out. So if you're singing, okay, as opposed to, yourself if you want to. Okay, so if you remember that minor pentatonic, the first word minor pentatonic, well, of course it works here. So if this is our note, okay. So just think about that scale. We've got this chord, and we know that the chord's making some of those notes. The notes are on top. Which so that what I'm playing there is like you might know that 7 shape. You've probably all seen that 7 shape. Oops, didn't mean to play that top note. Yeah, put that. So I'm just put that finger on. Then what I'm doing now, actually I'm taking that shape and I'm just making it like this. You see a lot of players like Mel Travis use this shape because you have the notes on the top, and if your thumb comes over, you can actually. Okay, so. Just using first position minor pentatonic. Okay. Play a 9 chord if you want, but we don't need to get into swing stuff yet. So this is how you can just very simply. I'm going to do a YouTube lesson too early in the morning. Well, I'm going to do a YouTube lesson too early in the morning. Drink some coffee. Okay, so that's a little way that just that third position minor pentatonic in a different key on the neck, how you think about it, just to open up a few basic ideas. And it's down to you, you know, do you drink? British rail. Make Britain great again. We remember that second position, that little blues house. So that's your second position. So anything you've learned from the earlier lesson, you should just be able to translate up and down the neck like that, you see. Okay, so it's time to bring this lesson to a close. Thank you very much for making it this far if you did. So a quick recap, we just looked at how you can take basic chords, how you can use a minor pentatonic scale to map out where you can put lead lines and give you a roadmap for that. What we didn't talk about is the blues scale. The blues scale is basically the minor pentatonic scale, but it also has an extra note in it. It has a 5, what's called a flat 5. It's much more interesting, but that's down to you. You need to maybe go in and after this is look at blues scales if you don't know them already. We then looked at phrasing, how to practice effectively. We looked at chord tones, we looked at a different key. There's a lot of stuff to go on there, so you know, if that's been of interest, there's loads of ways you can help us in return. You can just drop some money in our Buy Us a Coffee thing. All the links are in the description below. The best thing you can do is join mine and Jack's mailing list. We'll send a few emails a year saying where we're gigging, if we've got records out. We don't want to spam you, we just want to keep people in touch with where we're at. Otherwise, find us on all the socials. Like and subscribe as well, that is the best way. So, thank you everybody. Bye for now.